Okay, everybody, this is week 4, theory and adjustment in older adults. This lecture is going to talk about some of the theories that we need to deal with when we're working with older adults and how they adjust to their changes, many changes that they need to adjust to during this time in their lives. So there's a couple of key terms that you want to know the differences between. Non-stochastic theories explain biological aging as a result of a complex predetermined process, and stochastic theories view biological aging as a result of more random assaults from internal and external environments. Stochastic theories, there's 4 that we're going to discuss: cross-linking, free radical, wear and tear, and evolutionary. And you'll want to be able to, if I give you an example of an individual, you want to be able to see which of these theories they fit into. So cross-linking is when we deal with cellular division. It's threatened because of radiation and chemical reactions. And these cross-linking agents attach to DNA, they accumulate, and they cause this aging response. And when you think about radiation or chemical reactions, you shouldn't think of anything like massive blast radiation. You should really consider things more like pesticides that we might come in contact with in our environment, unhealthy food sources, cleaning agents, preservatives in our food, air pollution, things like that. Free radical theory deals with unstable molecules that contain an extra electrical charge, and they damage our proteins, enzymes, and DNA. And so when we talk about free radical theory, we're always talking about molecules that have this extra charge that are causing problems. Wear and tear theory is attributed to just the repeated use and injury of your body over time. The body functions less efficiently due to prolonged use and abuse. This is really typical of what a lot of people think of when we deal with aging today, that they'll say things like, well, I've lived a good life, or I used to play football, or I had a football injury, or things like that. And that's all that wear and tear theory. And how they may not be thinking of it specifically, but they're using that theory to talk about how their body's working at that time. And then evolutionary theory is when there are genetic processes as a result of mutations and natural selection. And so evolutionary theory really says that the strongest live the longest. So to get more in-depth on each of these, cross-link theory has to do with that cellular division, radiation, and chemical reactions. It accumulates over time, and therefore we have trouble with intercellular transport. So we're not going to move food sources and oxygen to the cells. They're going to then not work as well, less efficiently, and it'll result in system-wide organ failure. Free radical theory, again, deals with those free radicals, the extra charge, and it's believed that antioxidants help protect the cell from those free radicals. So they can be formed, like I mentioned, as a result of normal processes or a result of diet, stress, smoking, alcohol, etc. So those are key thought processes as far as free radical goes, and many people do believe that the antioxidants will help protect the cell from that free radical damage, but we don't have any true research findings that give us that definitively. Wear and tear theory, we wear our bodies out over time. We've accumulated a lot of stressors and impaired tissue. Some people definitely do more damage than others. but everyone loses function just by being alive. So the end result of wear and tear theory is that we are all going to die regardless, and how long we live is a function of what we've done in our previous years and days. There's another theory that is supported by evidence but doesn't seriously explain all aging in humans, and that's evolutionary theory. And it's based on that natural selection. Strongest and the fittest are the ones that survive, and the survival rates decline as we get older. So, for example, our kids who are born with mutations don't live long enough to have offspring, so they don't pass those mutations off. Or the body uses energy not related to genetics, and there's only a certain amount that's available. So because some of that compromise must occur, that decline over time and eventually ends in death. Non-stochastic theories, program theory and immunity theory are the two big ones. And program theory basically says that our cells can only reproduce themselves a certain number of times, and then they just can't do that as well anymore. And the immunity theory deals with T cells that decrease with age, and so our defense mechanisms are reduced, and that leaves us with a body that's more susceptible to immunity and problems due to infection. So program theory or clock theory also suggests our bodies were programmed. That was the intent when we were created. And we have this inner biological clock that says, well, how many times our cells can divide. And when it's done, then it just can't work. We might still be alive, but we're not reproducing healthy cells anymore. We always should recognize that our body's not a machine in this theory, and because they are dynamic systems, they age, and that aging is a continual process. Further explanation of immunity theory, again, we're going to deal with T lymphocytes and that immune function that decreases with age. And this explains why seniors are more apt to have colds, flu, chronic inflammatory diseases, and such. Otherwise, our immunity helps protect us from these viruses, bacteria, and other invaders. And as we get older, we're not able to protect our bodies quite nearly as much. There's another theory that's used, and it's really no longer supported. So it doesn't really fit under these stochastic or non-stochastic theory categories, and it's called disengagement theory. It was created by Cumming and Henry in 1961. Don't memorize the date or those names. But disengagement theory was seen as a developmental task at that time, and that it was appropriate for persons who were older to withdraw from society and just stop functioning as a active and contributive member of the society. But we no longer support this theory. We might see some disengagement in some individuals, but we know that older adults now can provide quite a significant amount of support and active processes throughout their life. So it's not supported by scientists any longer. One theory that you'll really want to know, and you should have covered this before, is Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And it basically deals with the fact that each individual has this set of needs, and that those needs motivate all of our behavior. It's depicted as a pyramid, like on the next slide. And its ideal form is to achieve self-actualization. And to do that, you have to meet all the other lower needs. And only about 1% of us are truly self-actualized. So when we look at our pyramid, we have to start at the bottom, and the physiological needs are first. That's why we always say the first thing you need to assess is airway. That's our basic physiological need that we must satisfy first. Heart rate comes next. Food, water, homeostasis, all of those others come next under physiological. Then safety deals with how your body is safe. You're able to provide for resources, for the family, the health, your property, employment. Love and belonging deals with friendship, family, and sexual intimacy. Esteem is confidence, self-esteem, achievement and respect by others. And then self-actualization deals with morality and creativity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, and acceptance of facts. Like I said on the previous slide, only 1% of humans reach that self-actualization stage. But anytime you're dealing with a test question or a situation, you could go back to this for years and say, okay, so what's the first thing I need to take care of? Okay, airway, heart rate. And then what? We need to make sure they're safe. And you can go through this hierarchy. It really applies to a great many different situations. Erikson also has a theory that deals with stages of life, and they are more psychosocial stages. There are 8 stages, and each stage represents a type of crisis that needs to be resolved. For older adults, we'll start at 40 to 65, which is really middle adulthood, but we have generativity versus self-absorption or stagnation. So in this stage is when adults have that tendency to find that they need to generate productivity and show that they're fulfilling something in their life. And then when they get to the 65 to death or older adulthood, it's ego, integrity versus despair. And this is the stage where they say, yes, I did have a purpose in life. I did fulfill that. Or I fall into despair, depression, etc. So we can see that if we satisfactorily fulfill our middle age development, we'll see that we've developed some generativity, and old age is integrity, and then unsatisfactory fulfillment, self-absorption, and despair. Peck expanded Erikson's theories and expanded those to be a little bit more specific for the older adult. So he added a final 3 of the developmental tasks for old age: ego differentiation versus work role preoccupation, body transcendence versus body preoccupation, and ego transcendence versus ego preoccupation. And these deal with the ability to say that I have made a difference, but also able to let that go and not becoming super preoccupied in a work role and unable to retire. The ability to accept your changes in your body for body transcendence that are occurring and understand your limits. And then ego transcendence deals with that spirituality and mentally able to accept where you are at and move on to that next stage. It's really important for you to understand both, all 3, Maslow, Erikson, and Peck's expanded roles with Erikson. We also want to talk about diversity and how older adults in the U.S. are becoming more and more diverse. We have a variety of different roles of diversity that we might see with older adults, and they don't just stop at race or culture or sexuality. They could involve quite a few different aspects of one's life. We do want to make sure that we provide culturally sensitive care and make every effort to preserve the residents' belief, values, relationships, roles, and traditions. Now, when I first got out of nursing school, for example, if people weren't married legally, they could not go back and see an individual as a family member or significant other in the intensive care unit. They would not allow that whatsoever. And now there are much more free reign and larger definitions of what it means to have a family member and who that person might be. It's also helpful if we don't force the facility structure onto a resident. Again, it used to be that we would give meds at this time, and this time. That might not work for every resident. So we need to think about what will work for that resident and how can we help meet their needs and what they're used to doing. And then ask them. So you don't know everything about every single culture. So ask them, what do you prefer? What dietary preferences? What time do you take your medications? Do you have any adaptations that we can help, or any unique ways? And maybe unique's not the right word, right? So how do you manage your illness? And how can I help you to manage your illness in this environment? There's some nursing diagnoses for this unit that you might consider and use that can be really helpful. Here's a question that I used last semester in some of the other lectures. So what statement would best explain the role of the nurse when planning care for a culturally diverse population? The nurse will plan care to include care that's culturally congruent from predetermined criteria, focus only on the needs of the client, ignoring the nurse's beliefs and practices, blend the values of the nurse that are good for the client and minimize the client's individual values and beliefs, or provide care while aware of one's own biases, focusing on the client's individual needs rather than the staff's practices. And D is the correct answer here.